I think what we've tried to say is, family is hard, it is messy, it is exhausting. For many people, their chosen family is as much their family as their family of origin. And so we try to write this to help give people tools that no matter what their experiences have been, what their season of life is, they can experience the power of family right where they are.
Well, our guests today are Chris and Julie Bennett. They're the founders of Welcome Home Lifestyle, which exists to create and promote content that celebrates all things family, and they're authors of Fighting for Family, The Relentless Pursuit of Building Belonging. And we're just going to get inspired today to build our relationships no matter what the circumstances are. And so welcome to the show, Chris and Julie.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
Good to be with you guys.
Such an honor.
So right out of the box, I'm kind of interested in the title of your book, Fighting for Family. And Chris, you write, it turns out that becoming family is stressful. It's messy, exhausting. And I agree with all that.
That's what we've heard.
Yeah, we've heard.
Yeah. So just curious, why the word fighting? Where did that come from?
Well, I think in one sense, we live in a world that knows how to fight with their family, but we fight for things that matter most to us. And we really believe that, as connected as we are, there's a false sense of connection. The amazing things of media and technology, we can do things like this. But I think there's a reality that even sociologists now are saying that this is the loneliest, most divisive generation that's ever lived. And as we were writing this book, there was a 85-page document that got released by the U.S. Surgeon General, and it was titled Our Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation. And, there's a stat that said 40% of Americans have 0 to 1 confidant. And so we can have people around us and experience loneliness, and we just believe that we were designed and created to do life together. COVID, I think, accentuated all of that when people were cut off from family and isolated. And I think what we've tried to say is, family is hard, it is messy, it is exhausting. For many people, their chosen family is as much their family as their family of origin. And so we tried to write this to help give people tools that no matter what their experiences have been, what their season of life is, they can experience the power of family right where they are.
And I will say with that word fight, we get to that today, but we've been through so much hard, specifically in the last 5-6 years, that where that word might have meant something different to us in one season, it means so much. It means hope in this season. And that may feel paradoxical a little bit, but for us, when we learned about perseverance through our stories, which we share all throughout the book, it meant something more to us, and we knew we had to have it in the title.
Julie, you write in the introduction of the book, and you tell us about, things that you're, the beauty of the mass of the family. And so why is it worth fighting for?
Yeah, I've learned through the hardest parts of my story and life that where the world wants to tell us that we should give up. We've learned that perseverance is not about an outcome, but it is about what's formed in the gritty heart of life. It's hope that's birthed. It's character that we hang our hat on that. And I'm like, man, I've experienced something where people have come around me and walked me through my hardest times. We share principles and strategies out of our stories, from people that have showed up, and not just your immediate family, but your chosen family. And I've experienced enough of life and people when I didn't feel like it, when I was like, I don't know if I can even get out of bed. And experiencing those things, I'm like, this is worth it every time. And in the intro, actually, of the book, we talk about the mountain. If you look at family like a mountain, you're like, okay, I've been to the top before and the views are really epic. Like, I know it's worth it, but I'm at the bottom right now and I am beat up and I'm tired. And sometimes I get halfway to like base camp and I'm like, but I want to be up there, but I got to reacclimate. I got to learn how to breathe a different way. I'm in a new season, or I'm with new people. I'm in a new city. I'm in a new job. I have a kid for the first time. And I'm like, I don't feel like climbing right now, but I just know that it's worth it because I've seen the view from the top.
And can I add on to that? We're kind of jumping ahead a little bit. Our first few years in LA was filled with 20 moves with 4 kids and 2 cancer battles for Julie. And I know this is not everybody's experience, but it shaped us because we began to meet people in Los Angeles, of all places, which some would say is one of the
Yeah.
loneliest cities in the world.
I've heard that.
And we found, essentially strangers that
Yeah.
became friends, that became like family, and they literally began to fight for our family. And I mean, when we had no fight in us, when we had no fighting for finances, we had no money,
Yeah.
health was, every day was a challenge. And we had people show up for us. And that's where this whole story started to form. As painful as it was, we were like, oh, wow, there actually is people around us that I believe God puts around us that can become family for us in a season. And not every person that is family, quote, in a season is there forever. Because even as we left Oklahoma and the church we pastored, there were people that were family in a sense for us in one season that didn't go with us in the next season. And we had to grieve that. But also realize, you know what though? We honor the role they played in our life, and then we go into a new season, and thankfully we
Yeah.
experience a new aspect of family we'd never had before.
That's an interesting thought because sometimes you mourn the loss of that
Yes.
Yeah.
and you try to put CPR on it and keep it going. But for a lot of times with a move, it's just hard to keep it, with those friends. I have a friend that puts it this way. That's what she calls my wife and I, friends that are like family. She uses that all the time. And I'm like, that's true. That's what it is. But it's hard when that doesn't work anymore.
It doesn't change. That's painful. One of the stories I share in the book, we kind of kick off the book. Again, we're sharing different principles that allow us to remove those barriers of building belonging because it's really freaking hard. And, yeah, let's just keep it real here. And we had just moved to a new city. We now had no home. We moved 20 times in 6.5 months while I did chemo. And I know we're jumping into parts of the story, but I had found I had stage 3 breast cancer just a few weeks after moving into a new city. And then the house we had sold in Oklahoma fell through. It was under contract. And so now we're like, cool, we own a home in Oklahoma. We've moved to LA. I now have stage 3 breast cancer with 4 children. And now everyone really thinks we're crazy. That's a longer story for another time. But I found myself being come out of some really hard situations relationally where we were. And there was a group of 14 women that invited me to come to their little girls group. And I'm like thinking, no way. My walls are like as high as the heavens, if you will. No, I'm thinking, I don't know. But the day I found I had cancer, I was like, I call it like, I put my backpack of like self-protection. Like I have all my stuff just in case I need to abort, at any time. And like, can I feel safe? But I needed somebody. And of course I have my family, but I don't know anyone in this city. But these women have invited me in. And I'm like, I'm not really sure how a group of 14 women work, like maybe a couple. But I show up, and long story short, what happened in my life over those next 3 years of battling cancer twice, 2 different times, or 4 years, is this group of women came around me who we were aligned in so many ways with our faith, but we're talking different political views. We're coming from different backgrounds and opinions and things. And I watched a group of women be family to me in this journey. If we look at life as a pilgrimage or fighting for family, there's a lot of journeys along the way. So this was a new journey in life I found myself in. And God brought me women that allowed me to just break. I had nothing to give to them. So I say it in the book, like they gave me their inches, even though I had no inches to give to them. And it developed in me hope again for what I thought I lost. And I really believe God does that at different parts along the way.
It is hard to make friendships in any place. Because I've lived in, oh goodness, so 10 states. I didn't do 20 moves, but I have lived in 10 states since 1998. And we moved here to Tucson.
I think you had me beat.
Right?
I've moved a lot, but that was, wow.
I've been to a lot of places. We moved here to Tucson, Arizona, where the Family Life Radio morning show is based in the height of the pandemic. And so we got here, went straight into, hibernation. And once I emerged, I was like super socially awkward, more so than before. And I am just now, 3 years later, starting to make friendships. And I encountered a new friend here as I struggle with some mental health issues and I was really battling. And I remember her saying, because I was going to cancel some plans because I was like, I don't want to start this new friendship off like that. And she said, I understand. Maybe you don't feel like yourself right now, but I think it would do you some good to get out of the house. And if you want to just have dinner, let's do that. And if you're not yourself, that's okay. We'll still have fun. So yeah, it's really nice to meet those friendships, to make those friendships that can kind of pull you out of yourself and allow you to be yourself, even in the darkest parts of your story. So
Even in the darkest stuff. Yeah, I battled with a lot of depression during that time. And I'm a big extrovert, outgoing. I love people. He's a bit more of an introvert. Like, he's a great pastor. He's a great listener. And I'm like, let's get together, be loud, and talk a lot, you know?
I'm like, I'm gonna go take a nap.
Probably because he has to listen to me all the time. But well, first of all, I want to say your glasses are epically cool, by the way.
well, thank you.
Just have to say that.
Thank you.
I want to be your friend just by your glasses.
Thanks. Let's hang.
Dang. But that was to what you said. You know, we had actually, it was kind of coming right out of the pandemic where you could at least have people over. We had this group of singles over our house because, again, even with this book, we're not coming as experts. We're coming as learners. Like, we believe family is worth it, but like, how the heck do you do it sometimes? I don't know. Here's what we've learned, and we want to learn from you too. You know, we do these checklists along the way. And anyway, we in the book, but to what you were saying, there was a moment where we had singles gathered in our home, and we're like, you know, we were married at 21. What in the world do we know about being single? Nothing, you know, but we're passionate about not just in life, not elevating being married over being single and all those things that we can do, especially in the church community, I think, at times. And so we're sitting around the table asking questions, and there was this mic drop moment from one of the girls at the table, and she said, oh man, it makes me cry. Like, belonging is not something that you find, it's something that you bring. And again, not that we can't find it. And I'm like, wow, that is really powerful. Like, so many times we are just waiting for somebody to give us what we need, which is not a bad thing. But it's that part of the risk and adventure, maybe just the risk and the scary part of family is like, I am worth it. Like, I'm a great person with all of my junk and bad baggage, and for me, maybe depression or whatever it was at the time. But I'm going to bring it to those. Like, there's got to be people that feel like I do. So I'm going to take the risk, and I'm going to step out, and I'm going to bring that, because other people are worth belonging as much as I am.
You brought up risk. And, you know, you talked about the move involved a risk, one that you chose and one that you didn't.
Yeah.
Delve into that.
Yeah. Do you want to?
I would say as a family, you know, we've always had a value for being risk takers, and I'm not the most adventurous human being. Julie is more so than me. But I heard something years ago. Somebody said, you know, faith is spelled RISK. And I think what we've never wanted to do is level off in life. And we live in a culture that I think elevates comfort and stability. And of course, there's a season for that. And we trust me, we got to a point after 20 moves, that's all we wanted was some comfort and stability. But I think we've always had this value of let's never stop taking risk. And I used to say something to the church we pastored in Oklahoma that always sounded really good in like a sound bite in a sermon. But man, when you're trying to live it out, you know, I used to say, you know, if God invites you into something, say yes before you know how. And we had really felt led by God through a myriad of ways to kind of take this message of family, in a sense, on the road and use media as a platform to be a champion for family. And so that's why I moved to LA. But it was a huge risk. And anything with a risk is there's always this sense of, man, this could work out or this could not work out. And through all the hard, I had a guy that texted me about a month before she got diagnosed. He's become a good friend since then, but we had just landed in LA. We were living with a family. And this guy texted me out of the blue. And he said, hey, I tracked your number down, but he said, God woke me up at 4 a.m. in the morning to pray for you. I'm like, I don't think God could wake me up at 4 in the morning, but I was thinking, he was like, I'll get him at 6 or 7. But he said, I felt God wake me up. And what I felt God said was, it's your faith that led you to LA, but it's trust that's going to keep you there. And he said, you know, I felt like God said he's going to give you incremental clarity so that you learn to trust him along the way. And that's, again, I read that thinking, oh, that's great, kind of tucked it away. And then everything hits the fan. And we would go back again and again and again and saying, we're willing to risk with God to the degree that we're able to trust him. And trust is more about his character I think for us, we would just go back to like our track record with God is somehow, even though if it didn't work out the way we thought, He has always come through for us. And we spent 3.5 years in LA, 2 cancer battles, 4 kids in private school with no income because I'm taking care of my family. And I can just tell you, we never missed a payment. We somehow paid the rent. I could tell you story after story of God's
Pretty crazy.
coming through in our risk.
Yeah. So to your question, it was like, yes, that was the risk. We were coming out being this, we're gonna conquer, all this stuff, and then we had no choice to be a brave family, and it was a wild journey.
Wow. It's just amazing to hear the depth and breadth. And for whatever it's worth, my husband and I were married when I was 20 and he was 21, so I get it.
We did it. Here we are.
I get
We
it.
made it through, but we are here. We're thankful.
Oh, so fun to look back and think, what were we thinking? I guess that's it. We were
What were we thinking?
just thought, you're cute. Let's just say yes to forever.
How many years have y'all been married?
You really want to know?
I would love
Yeah.
to know.
43.
Okay. Big cheers for you.
43. Our kids, my grandchildren are taller than me. I'm now the shortest one in the family.
Oh,
just to
you
let
look
know.
good, Sally.
So that's what's fun. Now we're young and the kids are young, and we just did Disneyland. And
You need a vacation.
Grandma and Grandpa kept up with those girls. I'm telling you, we didn't miss a beat. So there are benefits.
Love it.
It's worth the fight.
There
I
you
love
go.
what you were saying, Julie, about belonging being kind of in our wheelhouse, to just put it a different way. It's about how you're approaching situations. We talk about feeling lonely. We talk about how the pandemic has changed us. But what I found myself saying a lot as we're talking on the radio and relating to our listening friends, and that if I approach a situation with, are you going to talk to me? Or if I approach it with, hey, there you are, it's
you
a
go.
completely different feeling I have of belonging. And that's just a big word for me right now, and kind of a real, oh, I get it.
We had this situation, I pastor this church in Malibu, and, we've tried to really, as best we know how, make it feel like home and feel like family and very welcoming and all the things. But we had this lady that's in her kind of late 40s, single, doesn't have kids, and she emailed me, said, hey, I would love to get coffee with you. Absolutely. We go to coffee, and she said, hey, I needed to share something with you. She said, I've been coming to church for many, many weeks, and our church is so social and like, I don't think cliquey, maybe I'm off, but I mean, very like communal, and people love hanging out.
Maybe the first time we've experienced it not being clicky, right? Right. We try to, because it's, even in the church, I mean, just the church we used to pastor, I'm like, it kind of felt clicky, and I'm like, well, where do I fit? And I'm like
Totally.
Yeah.
doing this thing with him, and
Tank has had an experience
Oh,
with that.
gosh, I was when we moved to town. My wife and I were going to this church, and we've been there for about 2 years, and we realized nobody's walked up to us and introduced them to us. Besides staff that knew I was on the radio, that was it. Yeah, and I was like, okay. We decided to go to a different church, and it's been a different experience. So yeah.
Well, what she said to
Yeah,
me
this
that
story
blew
is
me
just
away
great.
was, I mean, she came with a really sweet heart about it. She said, I came for several weeks, and she goes, no one was talking to me, and I watched everybody talking to each other. So she goes, I decided to stand in the middle of the room one Sunday and see if anybody would come to talk to me. And she said, and nobody did. And she said, and I felt really hurt, and I was like, I'm not going to go back again. And then she goes, I went and I prayed, and I said, God, what do you want me to do? He said, I want you to find every person that looks and feels like you, and I want you to go to them, and I want you to bring belonging to them. And so she started coming, and to your point, Sally, her whole perspective changed, and therefore her experience changed. And I just thought, wow, it's so powerful, because I don't think anybody was intentionally leaving her out, but when she switched her intention and her perspective, but I think that phrase was so powerful, because if you don't think you belong, you're waiting to be left out and rejected. And then that loneliness just perpetuates our own pain.
And it doesn't mean that she doesn't still feel lonely at times.
Sure.
It was just she's trying to, like, it's not like, oh, cool. No, I mean,
But that took a lot of courage for
took
her
a lot
to
of
do that.
courage, and it's changed me. I've been in moments where I'm like, nobody's talking to me, and it's like, well, what if I find that person? Without expectations, this new phrase that I can't remember who said it. I can't claim it, but having expectancy in life, whether it's like going to a new church or whether it's like in a new job, without expectations. A book tour, we're releasing a book and like, God's all these books. It's like, I have expectancy of how this book's going to do. This was God's idea, not mine, truly. This book came to us. I'm like finishing chemo. I can barely remember his name. Like, I can't write a book.
Chris.
It's Chris. Nice to meet you, babe. Glad you're it's like, but in life, like great expectancy without expectations. And I've just been like, that's been playing through my mind a lot. But anyway.
Yeah, love that. I could hog the whole time, but I'm going to throw it to Kank. it's just you're just so full of such great encouragement.
Chris, I felt myself taking a deep breath when I, read in your book, you stop pursuing perfect family, and that we should pursue. So what should we pursue as a family if it's not perfect?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, we live in a culture, and I hate to make these sweeping statements, but I think because of the Instagram world, we're usually gonna post our highlights, our greatest moments, the family picture that looks so beautiful. And a few weeks ago, I was doing a sermon about family, and was showing a picture. We did this big farm to table dinner, about 100 people from our community, and it's food over an open flame and candles and strung lights, and like everybody
dreamy.
has the ideal of family. And then I said, this is the ideal. And then I showed the next picture was a pile of dirty dishes piled out. I said, this is the reality of what family feels like. And I think for us, because we're all hard on ourselves, and so whether it's a comparison of somebody else, how they do family, or whether that's good or bad, to go and say, perfection one is an illusion. It's not possible. And if perfection's the standard, then what's going to happen when we fall short is we're going to fall into shame, guilt, anger, whatever, and we're going to overcompensate. But if we can go for what we say is a healthy family, and kind of the analogy we used is, we live in a there's so many challenges outside of home that our kids are dealing with, that we're dealing with on a daily basis. And a greenhouse is the analogy we think about, where the essence of a greenhouse is that whether it's winter or summer or spring or it's raining, whatever's going on, you can create an atmosphere in the greenhouse that things can still grow. And so I think our goal in parenting has been, okay, we believe from a faith perspective that God's put a seed inside of every kid of purpose, of calling, destiny, whatever you want to call it. And our goal as a parent is to create this atmosphere that, they're going to go out and experience things, hear things, see things. In parenting, we want to protect without control. That's probably a whole other thing that we could unpack. But at home, we have these ingredients that we talk about in the book. And so, forgiveness is a big one. Honor is a big one. Healthy boundaries is a big one. If we can have the right temperature atmosphere at home, then what we believe is you can grow a healthy family that then, now that we have a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old, one's playing college football, the other's a tattoo artist doing his career thing. And we're watching, we didn't do it perfectly, of course not. We write about it openly in the book, and our kids know that. But we did our best to model vulnerability, to own our own junk, not put it on our kids, and take responsibility. And I think the sweet thing has been seeing the fruit of that. So I would just tell anybody, remove this essence of perfect family. It's not possible. Go for healthy family.
Amen. Julie, why is it so... Why are family relationships so hard? I'd love to know. I don't know myself. They're not easy.
Well, that's what we've heard that.
I think I'll answer this for myself. Personally, is family relationships are hard because it's like human plus human equals human problems, right? Like it is a constant, okay, here, I'm gonna say this for me. I grew up in an actually amazing Christian home. My parents are awesome. My brothers are awesome. But I experienced a lot of, not in my immediate families, sexual abuse that came in early. And then we had massive betrayal at the beginning of our marriage. And like, I look at some of the ways that family was so hard for me, whether it was in, being married, or whether it was in my friend groups or whatever I was doing, because I lived with a constant sense of I am not good enough actually for the person that's in front of me. Like it was there was so much fear and shame, but I like was really great at compartmentalizing, and I was a master at it actually, and managing myself for other people. That eventually, when those things eventually break down, I started to really become passionate about this whole topic of fighting for family and belonging. And of course, I was fighting, literally fighting for my life, especially in 2020 when my cancer came back with a vengeance. And I was like, okay, is this really worth it? And I think it's hard because we don't believe we are worth finding family. Deep, deep down, so many of us have like, yes, it's a great idea. And yes, we're made for it. But I really don't believe I'm worth it. I would have said I was, but I wasn't. And so being able to unravel those things, and so in our own family and with our kids, and then I'm practicing means I've never arrived somewhere, but I believe it's worth it. Like, I'm practicing fighting for family, because again, like I said, I've tasted part of it, so it's like I have learned to go, okay, I got to recognize my own stuff so I can build healthy family. I've got to recognize this. So we've learned how to be appropriately vulnerable with our kids and our friendships. We say something around our house now that we've been working on, really, I'd love to say the last 10 years, but really the last year, maybe 6 months. And it's this concept of true confession. So, true confession, repentance, and transformation. Now, when I thought of confession growing up in the church, I was like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. But remorse is not repentance. And what has helped us really create deeper vulnerability and more pure and like healthy relationships, again, with each other and our immediate family, which then spills out into how we do life and family with others, is that, man, Chris, I'll use Chris as an example. Hey, Chris, I'm actually feeling really angry with you. So true confession is just telling the truth about what I'm really feeling. I'm not talking about dumping and like slapping you in the face with my words. It's, I'm feeling really angry about this. I'm recognizing how I really feel. I mean, God was the master. Jesus created, he was the master at our emotions and actually recognizing them. So a vulnerability of, here's my truth right now about how I'm feeling. And because I'm not managing it and like quoting just the right verse to make the situation better, I'm honest, and he gives me space to be honest. And so then repentance is changing the way we think, right? So in the situation with each other, and then it brings transformation. And as we've practiced that really messy and really, sometimes he's being honest with me and I'm like, shut up. Like, like, I'm putting walls up and I'll talk to you in an hour. Like, messy, right? This isn't like, this is what we do and it's great. No, it's really flipping hard, but we're committed to it. So it's like, I've been at the top of the mountain, so I'm going to commit to it because it's at least worth it. And I'm going to have to mess up a lot. Instead of just, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, and nothing changes in my friendships or with my relationships with my kids. So learning how to be vulnerable with what is true. I'm actually not, I can't self-regulate right now. I'm not okay. But I want to be honest with you so that I can change the way I'm thinking about you or the situation. And then something transforms in our marriage or with our kids or in our friendship. The lady at church that chose to not be ticked off, bitter, and walk away, but said, Chris, I want to share. That was a confession. That was I feel really crappy at this church that I've come to, but you say we're this.
Right.
She chose to bring something true. And then out of that, there was a changing the way she thought. By seeking God in that meeting with Chris, there was actually a repentance, which is just changing the way she thought. And then a transformation came. So I'll pause there because I could keep, speaking of bringing you guys a sermon, I could keep going, but there you go. Maybe more than you wanted to that
I
question.
have to confess to people and then repent.
Do it right now,
Oh
though.
man!
Do it right now on air.
And not a confession of your sins. It's just really of like in relationally,
Telling
like
the
how we're
truth.
telling the
Yeah.
truth.
Right.
No,
Better
I think
way
this is good. It makes a lot of sense. All right, so we're talking with Chris and Julie Bennett. It's Fighting for Family, the relentless pursuit for building belonging. What do you say to those of us that are super discouraged and have lost energy to fight? How could you encourage those?
Yeah, Juan, just to say, welcome to the club. And no, I just think it's good to even acknowledge, and I think that's really normal. And the thing about family is this, to the question you're asking Julie, is one of the things we said in the book is like, we resolve to let people be complicated. And I think because we all have our baggage and our stuff we bring into any relationship, most people look really good from Instagram from a distance, but the essence of anything that's family is the place that you are likely to get hurt the most. But I read something recently from a sociologist said the irony of that is that the only place you get healed from that type of pain is in the context of community. So when we get hurt and wounded in something that was meant to be family, whether it's your family of origin, it could be a church wound, it could be any place that was supposed to be your safe place. Well, guess what? That's the place then you finally think, oh, I can open up, I can be vulnerable. And sometimes, like we've experienced in ministry, those things actually that we thought were a safe place got used against us. And we're like, oh, wow, we thought that was a safe place, right? And so I think the tendency would be, loneliness perpetuates our pain. So the alternative is either I pull away from everyone and I isolate myself so I don't get hurt again. But I'll just say it doesn't work. It doesn't help. I mean, it just depression, all the things, I mean, for many people now, what they're realizing is, and I'm not, again, there's dynamics to all this, but so much of depression now is being traced back to loneliness. Depression is the manifestation of loneliness for many people.
Not always, of course.
Yeah. But I would say for anybody that feels discouraged, one, say, we get it. That's normal based on your experiences, but there is a path forward. And I think for us, forgiveness has been the biggest step forward. And forgiveness doesn't always mean you have to be in a relationship with the person that hurt you. Forgiveness doesn't, can come without person ever even coming and acknowledging they hurt you. Forgiveness, we found, is so much, it's for ourselves as much as anything. It's so that we are free to move toward love again. And I think where there's unforgiveness, our hearts get hard and it keeps us from being able to get close. And I think we're just saying, you know what, I get it, but it is worth it to work through the hardness. And sometimes that looks like therapy, and sometimes that looks like counseling, and sometimes it looks like a long process. So I don't ever want to shortchange or minimize it. But I would just tell anybody, it's still possible no matter what you've been through, because we've seen it in our own life to experience that place of belonging.
That's a fascinating statement about family is the place where you are more likely to be hurt the most. And I wonder if you said that and it was like, ding, ding, it's true. Like if my wife says something, the one thing that really bothers me the most that she does say is when she has a misconception about me. Oh my gosh, that gets under my skin. It's like, no, that's not, I don't feel that way. That's not, I don't know where you got that. I'm sorry. Let's somehow figure that out. But maybe it's because other people, you just don't care about them as much. And so when someone you really care about says or does something, it's more like a dagger. Yeah.
It is. And I mean, think about Judas and Jesus. You're like, wow, this was a guy that was one of the 12. This was a guy that Jesus let in and gave him full access to his life, and before his betrayal, Jesus calls him friend, and you're like, what? But the risk you take, I mean, C.S. Lewis says something like, basically, if you don't ever want to get hurt, don't ever love, basically.
Yeah.
Don't love anything. Don't love anyone, don't love anything, and you can protect, but your heart will grow cold.
3 of the things that we mentioned in the book, and it's kind of what we try and live by, is I can't control everything. I will allow myself to be messy around others, and I will let others be complicated. And that's helped me kind of navigate, like, okay, hang on. Because myself, I just want to, my personality is more intense and all that. I'm like, if I can control these situations, then it doesn't work. So we kind of give ourselves guidelines of like, kind of coming back to that, which ultimately fighting for family is like, in the storms of life, it's kind of like acts as like a principle to help guide us. Like, that's why we wrote it, bring hope.
Love that. Oh. You talked about the women's group, obviously, that brought you hope in the middle of a pretty dark time where you're in a new city and you've been diagnosed with cancer. Were there some other things in the middle of that story that brought you hope? Like, how did you keep your chin up, so to speak? That's a lot to go through.
Yeah. I'd say this. So within 3.5 years, 2 different journeys. The first journey that we went on in 2018, where we were moving 20 times in the same 8 suitcases because we had to sell our house again. And we had movers in Texas. We had our stuff in Texas. They were trying to steal our stuff. That's just a side note.
Oh.
And here we're moving around wearing the same sweats, which I did burn. And the beanies, like, see ya. I had so much joy in the midst of it that it's almost weird to say. Now, joy didn't mean I wasn't ticked off some days and mad, but it was just like
Strange
supernatural.
joy.
Ooh, I like that. It was a strange joy. I think the Bible says something about a strange joy, doesn't it?
No, but I did.
It says we are strange, we're peculiar people, but yeah.
No, but I mean, a grace, a strange, a joy that I was like, whoa. I mean, I don't know if I've ever experienced it. And it's because God loves us so much right where we are at in our heart that he gives us stuff that I didn't realize was maybe even God in the moment. Like, oh, people are like, it's okay to not be okay. And I'd be like, I'm annoyed you're saying that. You clearly don't know me. And my fear was that you're going to judge and misunderstand me. And so I would take all this, but I'm like, no, I'm really doing great. And it's because if I were to have walked through, I mean, we came to LA a little beat up, which is another story for another time. And then we walked through what we're walking through. And I realized that if I was to be able to work through and experience family and all the things at that time, it would have probably crushed me. You fast forward another year, my COVID's hitting, cancer came back. I'm now in a home and I'm comfortable, right? Like I'm not moving around. There's a little bit, at least more stability. And I am a mess. I am not okay. Like I can't, I need, there's a lot going on. And I'm like, wait a second, I should be like better now. Look, and no, no, no. Actually, I'm now allowing you to learn how to integrate back and become healthy in the midst of this. Again, I don't have time to unpack that. But to your question, the other things, I don't know how to describe it except that what helped me get through it was more about, yes, these women got, I mean, they like fought for me again. Um, but I was learning things about myself that I had a grace for, that I can't explain it, that it's the paradox of I wish I never had cancer. Of course not. My body's still paying a price for it. It's hard. I do have fear that it comes back. I know the right things. I believe I'm going to live a long life. I hold on to that, but I also have the fear that like crouches at my door, right? And so back to like, I wish I never had cancer, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. How did those hold space together? Not sure. I don't have a sermon for that, but they do. And God doesn't waste our hard. So I was experiencing a hard around family and people, and there was enough to keep me hopeful, encouraged, even when I was discouraged. Again, a paradox of the two. And I was learning how to integrate into things. And so anyway, I don't fully know how to. A counselor came into my life that changed my life. That second battle of cancer that I didn't know I needed. And I'm one of those like I can do this on my own with God. And he's like, no, actually, you need some other people because you'll discover me through them or through this moment. Sometimes I could only binge Netflix. I was like, I probably should read the Bible or something. And God's like, that's okay. I'll just sit with you and watch some Netflix. Like that's all I could do. And I learned how to be okay with myself, which was the greatest gift and lesson in fighting for family.
Wow. Such a rich story you have to share. I want to get really practical for a moment and just talk about the family dinner table. Because I know even with just my husband and I, how easy it is to just do a Netflix night and you find you haven't even spoken to each other.
Totally.
So how have you found some ways to help you and your family connect?
No, I appreciate that question because I think there is a very practical part for anybody listening. But if you just to quickly go back and, I found this whole article about how, up until the 1950s, the dining table was the centerpiece of the American home. It was the place for vulnerability and connection. And then once the invention of the TV came out, and then there was the invention of TV dinners, and then families started gathering around the TV instead of the table. And they could even start statistically tracking some of the decline of the American home based upon the invention of the TV. And we know this now because go to a restaurant and see families that have kids with their headphones on and they've got an iPad in hand. And we're basically like, go be distracted. And now we have a whole generation that doesn't even know connection. They don't know how to look you in the eye. They don't know how to have conversations. And it's become escapism. And again, we love Netflix. We love having nights like that. But I think
sometimes I'm like, just watch the movie and put your headphones on. I mean, come on, sometimes we got to do it.
But I would say there's something very sacred about the table.
Yes.
And we see it even in the life of Jesus. Jesus was accused of being a glutton and a drunkard because of who he ate with. And he would unashamedly, unapologetically, openly have meals in homes with tax collectors and, quote, the sinners and outcasts of society. And the people that it ticked off were the religious people who judged him because they didn't understand who he came for. And I think he modeled the sense of belonging before they even believed. And he created a space around the table that said everyone can, again, these are cliche words now, have a seat at the table. I think that's what Jesus models, is a place of belonging. I think that's what the kingdom of God is about, is a place where you come, and it's even heaven's described as a banqueting table, a feast. So for us as a family, because life is full and life is busy, I think fighting for family is actually fighting for time. It's fighting for space. It's fighting for margin. And so then you go and say, all right, what are the things we actually value? And we know what we value based upon what we give our time to. So we can say we value X, Y, and Z, but if it's not built into the rhythm of our life, then it's not really a value. It's a good idea. So for us, because connection is a high value for us as a family, then we say, all right, then we're going to make that a bedrock of our home, which means we're going to have meals together, and they don't have to be fancy, they don't have to be extravagant, but we're going to have time around the table. We're going to put our devices away, and we're going to have intentional conversation. And even one thing I heard recently, and this is not original, but it's practical, is we had a friend that said, oh, growing up, we would say, what was your rose, your thorn, and your bud? What was the rose, the high point of your day? What was the thorn? What was the worst part of your day? And the bud, what is something you're looking forward to tomorrow? And simple things like that can stimulate conversation, I think, is really good. And you can practice that with your friends, your coworkers, or your neighbors.
And again, going back to the shame piece, sometimes we can feel like we're overusing that word in life, but yet it's very real for us, even if we're not conscious of it. And when feel like we're failing as a family, like, oh gosh, we haven't sat around the table and all these great ideals, we go, cool, we haven't been doing great at this. And we just recognize it and we go, cool, just adjust. If you got Taco Bell, oh, gross. Okay, well, whatever you get.
Maybe don't
Okay,
do
Taco
that.
Bell.
But
Now, I used to love Taco Bell, and then I got cancer. I was like, I probably shouldn't eat Taco Bell anymore. Anyway, but it's so good. Anyway, God, those Dorito tacos,
Oh, I know. Let's just take a moment.
just take a minute when I used to eat them. Anyway, no, even if it's Taco Bell around the table, you guys know what I'm saying. It's like,
Yeah.
instead of going, gosh, we're just doing great, we're not like we just go, okay, we've been really crappy at this. Let's readjust. What are our values? We talk about writing mission statements. We come back to certain things, or like, let's just readjust as a family. And we do it. So just be kind to yourself. We're all failing in some way, but the deal is just get back up again. Like, don't give up on the mountain of family.
I love that. Get back up again.
That is good. I think one of the most challenging areas for relationship, and you brought it up, Julie, and that is betrayal and forgiveness. Talk about that. How do you overcome that? I think that depending on the betrayal, some of it's deeper than others. That's very difficult to overcome.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I probably should kick this over to Chris, but I mean, we write about in the book, I mean, we've been married 23 and a half years, been together almost 25 and a half years. And it was because of a lot of what I was carrying that I never worked through. I had the major betrayals early in our marriage and had an affair. And, I'm so thankful for redemption, and that when God redeems something, it's better than it was before. And I can say that in our very imperfect marriage, that He has redeemed it and made it better than it was before. But I say that because it was like this. He forgave me in a way that is still to this day, not like, okay, I should do this. It was otherworldly. I can't explain it. The grace that He has to forgive, I'm like, I want to go kick their rear. That was my nice way of saying it on air. I'm like such a fighter like that. But the way He forgave me in that season, and we were babies, like we didn't know what we were doing in life or ministry. But then also on the other hand, I looked at my abuser 11 years after, and I looked in his face. That's another story. And like why I was looking at his face, that's another story. But I was like, don't like you, never want to talk to you again, don't believe you, don't trust you, but I forgive you. You don't get to have power over me anymore. And so it's been this, like, I'm forgiving, he's forgiving me, and how this all came together. So all I can say, it's not real profound. It's that I will fight to forgive at every turn. Because the only other option not doing that is being bitter and letting somebody actually have something over me. And I can forgive and go, God, you can take care of them, and that's not my job. I'm not going to be friends with them. And sometimes there is absolute beautiful reconciliation and forgiveness where the relationship's restored, and it's beautiful. But I don't know if you want to speak to that, or I don't know if I'm answering your question. But
Yeah, I think you are.
Yeah, I think, forgiveness, is essential. I think humility is essential, and the willingness to, even we went through some really painful stuff with spiritual leaders that was so hurtful, and I felt very wronged. But even God took me through a process of, humility is not I'm worthless, I'm nobody, and taking false responsibility. That's not humility. But I think humility is also saying, I'm speaking about this situation, areas that I needed to grow and areas that I needed to mature in, which allowed me to, see things in a different way. But I'll just tell the story very quick, because I mentioned it in the book. But the day that I found out about the affair, I didn't know, in my mind, didn't have anybody to call. We were the only ones of our friends married, and I felt very alone. And I grabbed my Bible that Jules had actually given me. It was a big NIV Life Application Study Bible, weighed about 63 pounds.
Yep.
You know what I'm talking about.
I have it.
It's by my bedside. But I drove to a Starbucks, and I sat down at a table by myself, and I said, God, I don't know what to do. I need you to show me what to do. Now listen, this has never happened before. The most miraculous thing God's ever done in my life. I drop it down, didn't flip through it. And I looked down after I said, God, what do I do? And it was open to Hosea chapter 3, verse 1. And the first verse my eyes see, it said, the Lord said to me, take her and love her as I love her, although she is an adulterous woman and loved by another man.
Wow.
Wow.
Underneath that verse was her handwritten signature, signed and dated
Jesus.
3 years earlier.
which I don't remember.
Wow.
So I don't have an
Wow.
explanation. Here's my whole point. I know that's a very unique story. Forgiveness is a choice, and there is a grace to forgive. And I think we all experience betrayal. It is unavoidable and inevitable, and especially in a situation that you risk for family. And I hate to say it, but we're all have wounds of feeling like somebody hurt us or wounded us. And I would just say, choosing forgiveness. And then if you say, well, I could never forgive somebody for that, I would say from experience, her and I both, there is a grace that God can give you if you're open to it, to forgive. And forgive doesn't mean you forget, and doesn't mean you act like it never happened, but it's so that your heart is free.
Right.
Wow.
And you're no longer a victim. Sometimes I think we hold on to those things because it kind of feels good to say, I've been wounded, I've been hurt, but it's a braver thing to forgive and stop being a victim of what happened to you. I just love what you said, Julie, about facing that person and just really laying it down and moving on. And so rich in what you all were sharing about it's inevitable. Whatever it is, name it. We're going to hurt each other. It's kind of sad, but true.
Yeah.
And, speaking from being married a very long time, there's lots of room for saying, I'm sorry, and accepting that and moving on. So
That's right.
just championing what you're saying. Thank you.
We like to ask one question before we leave, and that is, what brings y'all joy? And I put y'all in for Oklahoma to Texas purposes.
Yeah.
Yeehaw.
We used to have a thick accent, kind of talk like this. Like 21, and I'm
It's
like, why are we
true.
talking like this? And now, I
Guys,
don't
we
know.
found a video of me 2001. I'm speaking. I wouldn't even call it preaching. I don't know what you call it, to like 100 and something youth. And I said, hey, y'all, listen, you're going to get persecuted. And I said, I hope you do. And I said, I pray you get persecuted. I prayed for 150 teenagers to get persecuted. I was like, oh God, I
I was
unleashed
like-
hell on 150. Okay. Anyway. side note.
Anyway,
What brings us
we
to?
took the wrong way. Okay. What brings us joy? Not condemning people and telling them they should get persecuted because that's if you follow Jesus. No. What brings us joy?
I mean, a
Coffee. Oh,
great cup of coffee
Yeah.
brings
Yeah,
me
it's
a
true.
lot
Ooh.
of joy.
the coffee snob. I'm like, I'm not. Coffee's coffee.
I'm with you, man.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. All right, thank you. And honestly, I mean, and I'm not just saying this because I wrote a book about it, but I mean, being with my family, there's nothing that brings me more joy.
Amen. Yeah. Well, by the way, that family is the number one answer from all of our guests. Mostly talk about family. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
So that's
Okay, I think-
encouraging.
I'll
is
answer
encouraging.
mine really quickly. It's gonna be real weird. I wrote about it in the book, read the book, but God, this is so crazy. You know, it brings me joy. Dressing up as this character I have called Goldie, and elementary schools, and giving away gold coins and be able to call out the gold. You know, what, especially in schools where you're not talking about God or faith, but like I get to like it does. Regardless of what you believe, we all need the gold called out in each other, and nothing brings me more joy. Maybe because I just like to wear wigs and dress up, but watching people come alive by finding something, and that's also how we forgive. I'm getting too deep into the answer, but it's like I'm gonna see you not in your crap. I'm gonna see that. Anyway, but I'm really passionate about calling out the gold in others, and then having the gold called out in me because I need it a lot.
Yeah, so good.
That is good. Call out the gold. You know, what helps me along those lines is finding the uniquenesses of the person that you're married to, not irritating, because I think you get married to somebody
Yeah.
because of those things. You find them attractive, and then after you're married, you find them annoying. So it's finding a way.
That's your next book.
Yeah, exactly. But for me, it's finding a way to fall in love with the quirks again. And
Really good.
that's changed my relationship.
Yeah, and you have to fight for that sometimes.
You do. Absolutely. Yeah. Chris and Julie Bennett, great book, Fighting for Family, The Relentless Pursuit of Building Belonging. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank
If
you
people
so
want
much.
to learn more or keep up with us, they can go to fightingforfamily.org and they can email us directly, and we'll make sure we
Yeah,
respond.
we love messages. We love to hear your stories.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks for being with us.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much.